Hello, my name is Wuju Senshi, and today I'm bringing you a kind of different kind of guide than the stuff I would normally be putting on here. I started this YouTube channel pretty recently, and you may or may not have noticed this. If you're new here, then welcome, but if not, yeah, you've noticed that it's a new YouTube channel, and I'm just kind of getting started with this content I'm putting out here. I want to make a Yi guide at some point, and I definitely would do that at some point soon, when I feel like it's a good time for it. But strangely enough, the first guide I'm going to be bringing to you is one that's a very unconventional build that is borderline troll, but at the same time has a lot of potential. So you're going to want to hear me out on this one. So today we're talking about AP Master Yi, how to build Master Yi with an AP build, or at least kind of like it's like a hybrid build, but it's definitely like AP focused. And how to play that in Season 10, patch 10.5, and it'll probably stay relevant for patches in the future, unless these items get changed significantly. And yeah, so the way I thought of this build was I was just kind of one day, at the end of the day, I just wanted to mess around with practice tool, and I thought, oh, I wonder if Yi had to build AP, what kind of items would be built? Because there are a lot of AP on hit items in League that could synergize with these kit, and I thought about it, and was thinking, oh, would it be viable? Maybe like what would be the best build for it if I was forced to build AP by like a Twitch viewer or something? How would I do it? So I went into practice tool and realized something. One, it can actually do a lot of damage. In fact, it can even do more damage than some of the normal Yi builds that are like AD bruiser focused. It can do more damage than those builds in certain situations, and it lets you take advantage of some pretty cool item paths, like build paths. And it utilizes a different rune setup than the usual Conqueror that I think actually makes the build even better. So anyway, full disclosure, before I even get started here, do not first time this build in ranked. I promise you, you're going to lose LP if you try and use this build and you don't know what you're doing. In fact, 99% of the time, it's probably better to just go the normal Yi build, but this build can potentially, and again, with further exploration, maybe me or the other Yi mains of the community can help refine it if we wanted to really try to make this work. And it could be potentially good in some situations, even in ranked, but you really need to try it out first, know what you're doing, and be aware of the pros and cons. So I'm making this video because this person, I did a game on stream, and it was the first game on stream I had ever played with the build, and I only got to build like 3 major items on it. So I didn't get very far in it, and honestly I was just power farming most of the game. I got carried. I was just trying to power farm for the most part to get to these, like, because I wanted to build the items just because it was for fun, and we were most likely going to win the game no matter what I did. So I was just, having fun basically. And I was excited about building it for the first time in ranks. And one of my viewers clipped this and wanted me to make a guide on it, so that's why we're here. So I'm going to hop into a game, or a practice tool game, and I'm going to show you how the build works. So you'll pick E, and the runes you're going to want to run are Lethal Tempo, not Conqueror. The reason for this is that the build, this APE build, focuses on a lot of on-hit magic damage, which is, it actually works better with Lethal Tempo is what I realized. Conqueror is still a good rune and it works with this build, I think still pretty well actually, but I think Lethal Tempo, it's just synergizes a little bit better with what this build's strengths are. So you're going to want to go Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity again for more attack speed, Coup de Grace, and then for Domination, you'll take Domination Secondary and Ravenous Hunter, which is pretty good on Yi and pretty standard. Works well with this build as well as any other Yi build. Zombie Ward is my preference for what I take on the Domination tree, but you can take Eyeball Collection. And then yeah, just normal offense, adaptive force, and armor. Pretty standard Yi runes except for the Lethal Tempo part. Okay, let's hop in here and figure this build out. So a normal Master Yi build is Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits End, Styrax, GA with boots. Those are your 6 items. The 5 major items being the ones that I listed. That's a standard Master Yi build if you were to reach late game and you want to have the most balanced, like high damage but also great defensive stats. If you want that kind of a most standard, balanced Yi build, that's what you build. And that's about 15,725 gold build. And here, let me just do this real quick. set up, and that's gonna do. So okay, another thing I need to preface about this video is that I'm gonna be all the testing I did with these builds was in practice tool on these dummies. I have not gotten a chance to test out this AP build very much in ranked, except for the one time I played it on stream, and even then I barely got to like do much testing with it. But I've done all this testing in practice tool on these practice dummies, and I couldn't test out any percent, on hit damage items like Blood Razor or Bork when I was comparing the AD and AP builds, because these dummies have so much HP. You can't use percent HP items in practice mode, or else it's gonna make them seem way more useful than they are in ranked games. So anyway, with that in mind, here's how the build path goes. Ideally, you'll build Cutlass first. And this, by the way, can apply to jungle or lane Yi. In theory, lane Yi works with this too. Okay, let me say this. So assuming you're jungle, you're still building this. You're starting with these items like normal. And you're probably gonna also want to build at least Hunter's Talisman once you back, or maybe even the full like 1,000 gold jungle item, not the full one, but just like Skirmisher's Saber or Stalker's Blade. I think Skirmisher's Saber would be better, but at the very least you want to get a Talisman because you need that for clearing and you need the mana. But then once you get to this point, you skip your jungle item. You go right into Rageblade, Wits End, and then here's where those two items are actually normal in Yi. You're just skipping Blood Razor. But here's where it actually deviates. You go Stinger. This gives 80 ability power, 50% attack speed just like Blood Razor, and 20% CDR. And this is kind of like where the idea behind this is where your damage is the AP that you build on Yi and the damage that you're going to be, AP damage you're going to be doing with Yi is kind of done through this item, the Nash's Tooth item, because it does more on-hit ability power damage, magic damage, based on your AP. So you'll go this, and then your fourth item, if you can get to this point of the game, is going to be Gunblade. So you had your Cutlass as your first item. Did I say that? Okay, wait, let me make sure I said this correctly. So sorry, you get your first back, you're going to have your Talisman, and maybe even your jungle, like your 1,000 gold jungle item. But then your first, like, real item you start to build is Cutlass. You don't finish this into anything. You would go from Cutlass into, again, Rageblade, Wits End, Nashor's, and then you finish the Cutlass into Gunblade. So Gunblade is your fourth major item. After this, you have a lot of different options, or not a lot of different options, but several different defensive options or offensive options that work really well as like 5th, 6th items, but this is the core of your build right now. Who cares about this jungle item? It's not a important part of the build. These are your core items. Rageblade into Wits End, into Nash's Tooth, into Gunblade. And of course, ideally, you could have a Cutlass here before you reach your Rageblade. This is the build. So I don't want to throw a bunch of numbers at you, and it's probably going to be hard for you to process what I'm saying, so I'll try to give you some numbers to substantiate, why I think this build compares to the AD build and has its own potential, but I don't want to overwhelm you. So let's just I'll talk about the standard build, which was Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits End, Sterax GA. That's like a very typical Yi build. That costs 15,725 gold. It gives, when you build those items, and again, this is all, or not again, but this is assuming I did all this testing and practice tool with level 16 Yi, with this normal skill order, and running Conqueror on the 80. Like when I did this build testing with 80 Master Yi, I used Conqueror. So it's like a very standard Yi setup. And when I did attack these practice dummies with that standard build I just described, I did 1,150 DPS. 1150 DPS to the dummies, and I had 2,300 HP, 122 armor, and 100 MR. So you might want to try and keep those kind of numbers in the back of your head. I'll reference them again as the video goes on, but don't worry about it if you don't remember it. So that's like the standard Yi build. I'll just like put it here on the screen for you to visualize, I guess. So it'd be something like this, and then you'd have your boots. So this is like a very standard Yi build. Another thing you could do is, this is more of like this is another viable Yi build, but it's kind of the most damage heavy Yi build you can go without it becoming kind of too damage focused. You could go Wits End and Death Stance together. This is another popular Yi build that is extremely strong, but it's, you know, this is getting already pretty damage focused and not as much defense, which is really important for Yi in playing him in any actual ranked competitive environment. So yeah, with this build, it's 16,425 gold, and you do about 1,300 DPS to these 100 armor, 10,000 HP practice dummies. And ideally, you can even get a little bit more damage heavy without sacrificing too much, you know, like defense. You can sell your boots, get a GA if you don't need the tabbies or Merc Shreds, whatever you get. This does 1,500 DPS to the practice dummies. Okay, enough with all that prefacing here. Let me go back to the build I had before. So, GA, or Gunblade. Okay, so these are your AP items. So, with that in mind, APE is going to be... It's going to take longer to scale, and a lot of these items are more expensive, but it can do insane amounts of damage, actually, once you reach late game. Or at least once you hit this 4-item power spike. You need these, at least these 3 items, just like without the Gunblade. You need these 3 items to at least be somewhat relevant, I'd say. Just Wits End and Rageblade alone is like, you can farm, but you're not that strong in fights, I'd say. Once you hit Nashor's Tooth, you have, this is the same amount of attack speed you'd have if you, instead of Nashor's Tooth, you had Blood Razor. They both, Nashor's Tooth and Blood Razor both give 50% attack speed. So this is like relatively close, same amount of strength you'd have with a normal Yi build if this was Blood Razor instead. Like this. This build, as well as this build, are cool, are like a similar DPS, but you know, not, this AP version is not quite as much DPS. But once you hit the Gunblade, then you start actually kind of spiking and doing decent damage. So when you have, I'll start off with just the Rageblade. Starting with the Rageblade, you know, Rageblade is really the core item for Yi. It's the bread and butter for what makes him, you know, be able to carry like he does. And a lot of the time, if I'm really rich when I back, I like to just buy Rageblade first before I even get my jungle item. As good of an item as Blood Razor is, you know, one way of thinking about it is, why would you delay your strongest power spike item by 2,625 gold? Why would you do that? It's nice to just get your Rageblade right away. And even with just Rageblade, you do a lot of, like, you can do a lot with Rageblade. You clear really well. You're doing lots of on-hit damage with your E. If you play around having your Rageblade stacked so that you're, like, always hitting something before you get into a fight, and you have your Rageblade stacked when you enter a fight, even with just a Rageblade, you can be very strong early game. So it's not a bad item to rush, in my opinion. Or I should say, it's not a bad item to rush if you can buy it quickly, but if you're sitting on its components for a long time, like the recurve bow, the pickaxe, and maybe you have an amplifying tome, like, this is garbage. You don't want these items in your inventory for very long and fighting with them. So this is a good build for when you can get fed early game, or you just power farm and avoid having to fight early game, and get your Rageblade as soon as possible. And again, like I said, ideally you could get a Cutlass first so that you're not so, you know, it gives you a little bit more early game viability. Cutlass into Rageblade makes more sense, but you can also, I guess in theory, just rush Rageblade right away. After Rageblade, Wits End, this is, again, standard Yi build stuff. So, like, normally you would go Blood Razor into Rageblade, and then Wits End is basically the most popular and most viable third item choice after Rageblade. So it's very similar to the normal ADE build, or like standard Yi build, except you skipped your jungle item, Blood Razor. And that's okay. These 2 items together are still very strong together, and Wits End does flat, like, magic damage on hit, so it's a flat, things that do flat damage are, you know, better early game and not as good late game, but in general, this is still a good combo. Like, you're still, you know, this wouldn't be as strong as if you had Blood Razor and Rageblade, but this is still decent. Like, you can fight with this, but it's still better to, like, you're still doing a lot less, or not a lot less damage, but it's not ideal to be fighting at this point in the game yet. These 2 items is, yeah, what you want to start with, and you want to still keep farming once you reach this point. But it's not impossible to fight with it either. So at this point, you can still deviate into a different kind of build. You know, you could potentially build Bork. I mean, it's a little bit troll, honestly, to build Bork after these two items, but you can, like, you know, basically jump or, like, you know, get out of the AP style if you don't want to at this point. This is still a normal Yi build path, kind of. So you could end up building this into, like, Bork, and then have, like, you could buy your Blood Razor later, or just get, like, Sterax GA. I mean, that's kind of true, honestly. You probably would get something like, I don't know what you'd get. Maybe like this. Get these items. I don't know. Like, the point is, you don't have to commit to the AP build once you get Wits End. You can still build other stuff that's like normal Yi. After Wits End, what you build next in the AP build is committing to the AP playstyle. And that's Nashor's Tooth. So this gives you 20% cooldown reduction. And that's like one of the other benefits of this build, is the fact that you get a lot of CDR in this build. And I think I already talked about Nashor's Tooth a little bit, like why it's strong, or like what its purpose in the build is. And then once you get into Gunblade, this is a great item for Yi because, especially with this playstyle, because it gives a lot of AD damage and a ton of AP damage as well. And it gives you that healing for 50% of damage dealt effect that Conqueror would do for you when it's fully stacked, but you don't have it in this build. You have Lethal Tempo instead. So it's kind of like a replacement for Conqueror, having Hextech Gunblade in there. It gives you AD scaling, which he always likes. It gives you the the scaling that the AP stats you want for this build as well. And this Lightning Bolt, the active, does like 300 magic damage at this point, which is like a really nice part of this that gives it the, like, one of the things that makes Gunblade, I think, better than Bork is like this burst potential. It does a lot more damage than the Bork passive, or Bork active does. So this build's really good against squishies in general. That's another thing. This build's much better against squishies than tanky people or tanky enemy champions, in my opinion. And this is another reason why. This Gunblade active can blow people up for 300 AP damage right off the bat. And it allows you to get your lethal tempo, like, starting to proc. So you'll Gunblade someone, and as you're catching up to them, you can start hitting them with lethal tempo already activated. So I guess I'll go over some more numbers here. So this is okay, let's look at 3 items first. When you have these 3 items, this costs like, let's see. I have notes here on my side here. So, okay, actually, I don't know. So this is 6,000, oh, this is 9,000 gold altogether. Yes, this is 9,000 gold worth of items. Whereas your normal 3 item power spike with your like normal Yi build with Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits End, that's about 8,600 gold. So this is a more expensive build already, just at 3 items. And it doesn't do as much damage. Your normal 3 item build with, again, Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits End does about 850 DPS to these target dummies. And also, I don't know if I said this earlier, but you want to make sure I did not take Blood Razor and Bork like into consideration when I did testing, because the percent HP damage does too much damage to these 10,000 HP dummies. So I just used an equivalent amount of attack speed when I was doing the testing. So yeah, a Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits End build does about 850 DPS to these dummies. Instead, this AP build with 3 items, which is more expensive, does less damage to the dummies. So it's not strong at this point yet. It's, well, wait, no. I take that back. I lied. Rageblade, Wits End, and Nashor's Tooth will do actually more damage than your normal 3 item build with Blood Razor. So actually, what I told you is a lie. I told you that these 3 items together are stronger than Nashor's Tooth, but actually, when you have Lethal Tempo especially, that's not true. These 3 items do more damage than Blood Razor would. The Blood Razor version would. You do 940 DPS with these 3 items. Okay, yes, sorry. You do 940 DPS, and you get to 3.37 attack speed. Yeah, look. Again, this is level 16, so you're not going to be this high level by the time you get these 3 items. You'd be closer to, like, level 14 or something. But yeah, you get a lot of attack speed with lethal tempo in these items, and you do here I did like 1000 DPS to this practice dummy. So, you know, like 900 to 1000 DPS with this build versus the 3-item on hit, the 3-item normal ADE build does 850 DPS. So this is like throwing a lot of these numbers at you is probably confusing you. But the point is, you're doing about 100, like you're doing about 100 to 150 more DPS with this build than you would with the other build. And again, this is practice dummies where they have a lot of armor and magic resist, so the numbers are not exactly the same when you take it over to ranked. But the idea is that it does do more damage with just these 3 items. The only disadvantage is you don't have this like jungle item. Like you aren't as good against tanks. You don't have percent target HP, max HP, and then you don't have this jungle item, Red Smite. It's not the end of the world. Once you get Gunblade, this is where your AP build is basically finished, and it opens you up to... Oh yeah, let me also talk about... Okay, when you have these 4 items, this is a... let me see. This is a 12,400 gold build, and the alternative, which would be, say you got... If you had the normal Yi build and you had Blood Razor and GA instead, this is a 12,525 gold build. So it's actually... or sorry, no, it's an 11,400 gold build. So this build is about 100 or about 1,000 gold, roughly 1,000 to 1,500 gold cheaper than the AP version, which would be, yeah. So this is about 1,000 gold more expensive than if you had 4 items with a standard V build. So it's starting to get more pricey already. It's actually, no, it's more than 1,000. It's probably like 1,500 to 2,000 gold more expensive. So it definitely takes longer to scale. Once you have these 4 items, your DPS goes up to 1,200 DPS on these practice dummies with just these 4 items. Lethal Tempo, level 16. I'll show you. So yeah, we're hitting like, you know, 1150, 1,200 DPS on these practice dummies. Whereas the normal Yi build with Conqueror, Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits and GA, that's like a standard 4-item Yi build with the conventional Yi playstyle, that does 970 DPS to these practice dummies. So you're doing like 33% more damage with this 4-item power spike than you would with the normal Yi build. So hopefully I'm not overwhelming you with too many numbers, but for those of you who care about the numbers, you know, you can go back, watch the video, and kind of like think about the numbers again in your head if you really want to like know all the math behind it. Yeah, at this point you're already kind of stronger than your normal Yi build. The problem is this has basically no defense except for Wits and magic resist. You need to be able to just auto attack people a lot and heal from your Gunblade and Wits End and Ravenous Hunter healing. That's your only defense really. Whereas a normal Yi build would have Red Smite and GA, or maybe like Stare Axe, and those have like, you know, a little bit of a stronger defensive ability. So you just got to be aware of that. This build is not that good against champs that will blow you up very quickly or have a ton of CC. Or again, it's not as good against tanks just because you don't have the percent HP damage of Blood Razor. But it's not that bad either. If you're really fed and you can afford to buy these items, and you can power farm early game or just get enough gold to reach this more expensive build, then it does a lot of damage. So after this point, this is where stuff gets really interesting. You can go for some very unique defensive items with this build that you normally could not build with AP Yi or with a normal Yi build. And that one is what I personally think is the best 5th item, Zhonya's. Build Zhonya's to get not only some more AP, you get a good amount of armor, 10% CDR. You're reaching 30% CDR now by this point, which is really good. You can get 40% CDR with blue buff. But you also get this Zhonya's passive, the Zhonya's active, which has been the bane of existence for Yi mains for, you know, ever since, as long as you can remember, right? But now we get to use it on our champion, making us even more annoying and horrible for other people to face on the Rift. Now we're abusing it with this build, and you get to use it every 2 minutes. And I think it's really useful. As it's actually like you build stopwatch, or I build stopwatch on Yi very often, and it's so useful, and I wish I could use it more often, you know, than just one time. But with this build, I get to. It really works well with Yi because, like, especially when you're team fighting, you can often get a reset if you get your stopwatch off. Just get a little bit of damage off, and then, you know, when they're about to burst you down or kill you, use your Zhonyas, and you'll get your reset. And then once Yi gets your reset in a team fight, like, you've already won the team fight a lot of the time. Getting your first reset is like the biggest priority for Yi, and having Zhonyas will enable you to live long enough for your team to clean up that one person you got low but couldn't quite finish off, get your reset, and then you can win the team fight. By the way, another great thing about this build is you heal so much from your W. Your W does anywhere from like 70% extra healing to like double the healing. Right here, I haven't even finished my build, and my W is already healing for twice as much as it would normally. Like, as a normal ADE build, you have almost no AP, so you're only basically healing just for the base value of what your W offers. But here, my AP ratio, which is 100% on your W, is doubling my healing. So if you can let your W channel, you are going to heal for so much. And again, if CC is bad, this build is not great against CC. But if they don't have too much CC, you can channel your W and you heal for so much. They're never gonna, like, they would never be able to expect how much you heal. It's really hard for them to play around it. Again, this works better in low elo because in higher elo they're gonna, you know, they're gonna know how to deal with that. They're gonna build grievous wounds. They're gonna take CC champions, etc. So after GA, or sorry, after Zhonya's, I think the best next option is GA. Having this combination is such a powerful combo because having Zhonya's and then GA on top of it, it's like, how are they going to kill you? And even if they do, you're going to come back to life. And this also gives you a ton of armor between these two. 167 armor is like the perfect amount of armor you want with this much HP, 1900. So this build is just really great defensive, like, passives slash actives, as opposed to like a normal Yi build. You can still have GA, but you have like Sterax instead of Zhonya's, which I just think Zhonya's is a better defensive item in general. It's just like the unique value we can give of like having stasis is, yeah, it's just a broken item in the game, honestly. One of the most broken items in the game. So being able to have GA and Zhonya's together, very strong. Instead of Zhonya's, you could also, like, against a team that doesn't have a lot of AD, if you're facing a team with a lot of AP damage champions, you can take an alternative which is similar to Zhonya's, but it gives magic resist instead of armor. Banshee's Veil. This gives another kind of unique passive that is only accessible with this APE build, which is the Banshee's Veil spell shield. So it's really good against, you know, stuff like Veigar or I don't know, what else? Like Malphite, stuff where you like want to dodge a crucial spell that would CC you or do a lot of damage to you. Instead of Zhonya's, you could have Banshee's Veil. It gives CDR just like Banshee, or just like Zhonya's. Gives 75 AP just like Zhonya's. Gives 60 MR instead. Even though there is another item like Banshee's Veil, I think it's called Edge of Night. It's like the lethality item that also gives a spell shield. It's just, it's hard to work into a normal ADE build. And so a lot of the time you wouldn't build that. But in this APE build, Banshee's Veil fits in quite well. So you could build Banshee's Veil you could build a Banshee's Veil and a Zhonya's, honestly. It's kind of just a toss-up between these three items, what you want to build for your last two items. You can build Zhonya's, Banshee's, or GA. When it comes to actual testing, like what does the most damage, I found that GA does the most damage between these three items. It increases your damage by the most because it gives the AD, which mastery, you know, scales pretty well with, right, as we all know. And if you want to go for even more damage, you want to sacrifice more of the, like, utility of the Zhonya's or Banshees, and you want just more damage, you can go for Death Dance. This is like a Katarina build here, where you have Gunblade and Death Dance together, giving you a ton of healing off all the damage you do, 30% altogether, making up for your lack of Conqueror. And I guess this build would be even better if you had Conqueror instead of Lethal Tempo, because your survivability, you'd just be healing for literally like half of the damage you deal. But again, I think this AP build generally works better with Lethal Tempo. So with this build, this is like the most damage you can get with this APE build, although it's not as much AP anymore, it becomes more hybrid. But you start to reach crazy damage numbers, like 1700. And it's not, I don't think it's that troll. It's actually pretty good if the enemy team doesn't have any CC, because like you can just keep on healing off your auto attacks and your damage, Death Stance, Gunblade, Wits End, Ravenous Hunter, all that healing. But in a lot of situations, this is not, I think, as realistic. At least if you have, you know, Death Stance, maybe instead of a GA, you'd get the Zhonyas. So this is basically like, you're very similar to Katarina. These are 3 core Katarina items: Hextech, Gunblade, Death Stance, Zhonyas. But that's not the max damage. It would be like, you know, GA instead of Zhonyas. But realistically, getting Death Stance in this build is, I mean, I haven't tested that much in ranks, but I think it's probably too cheesy. More realistically is having this like really unique combination of defensive items, Zhonyas with GA, I think is going to probably work out better. But again, I'd have to test it more to tell you confidently which one is the one you'd want to, or which is the like style you'd want to run. It's really up to you, honestly. I'm just telling you what I've done with my testing and my experimentation, and you can kind of just see what works better for you. But these are the options that are available to you, you know, with this APE build style, APE playstyle. So I guess with that, I mentioned how this build gives you a lot more CDR. If you do go the Death Stance build, you do get 40% CDR without any blue buff or any other, like, just from your build. And that puts your Q, and again, this is at level 16, maxed out Q, maxed out E. Let's just see what the maxed out W would be. Sure, why not? Maxed out R, blah, blah, blah. So your Q is now on an 8.4 second cooldown, very low. W is on a 17-second cooldown. Your E, 8-second cooldown, whatever, that's not as important. Your R is at a 51-second cooldown, that's really nice. So your CDR is like a really underrated stat on Yi, and a lot of people don't realize that. But Yi mains who are more seasoned do know the value of CDR in Yi, because having your R up in fights is really important. If you use it to run away or you use it and don't get a reset, it feels really bad to not have it up for a long time. 70 seconds in a lot of cases. But here it's like 50 seconds. And your Q being on a lower cooldown as well is really nice for getting resets, because if you have a lot of CDR and you get a reset, then usually you only need like 1 auto attack to get your Q off cooldown again. So basically, long story short, cooldown reduction is a really nice stat on Yi, and this build gives you a ton of that. So I think I already mentioned this, but in general, or I may have not, but in general, normal Master Yi build does about 66% physical damage and about 33% true damage. In general, that's kind of your damage distribution throughout the game. With this build, your damage is basically evenly balanced, 33% between physical damage, magic damage, and true damage. The enemy they can't stack MR against you, and they can't stack armor against you. They have to build both to really negate your damage significantly, and that's really hard to do. So, and of course you can modify your build based on like how they're building. If they are smart enough to start building a lot of magic resist to, you know, negate your AP damage, you can build a Death Stance and a GA. If they're just stacking armor against you, like, you know, they normally would against Yi, then you can build, you know, Zhonyas with Banshee's Veil or something. Get lots of AP. I guess you could even get like a death cap, but you know, that's kind of unrealistic just because of how much it costs. You could go, if you want to go like a full AP build, like just all like balls to the wall, you're only building tons of AP damage, no defense. I think the best options would be Rabadons, and then like a Banshee's Veil or Zhonya's, or maybe even Lichbane for your 5th and 6th items. This is like kind of the maxed out AP damage you can do with a Yi build that makes even remote sense. But, you know, like I said, this is basically the standard AP Yi build that I think makes the most sense, is these 6 items here that you see in my bottom right corner. So yeah, that's one of the advantages of the build, is just the fact that it gives you a much more balanced damage distribution that a lot of enemies won't know how to, you know, they're not going to be able to build to negate all parts of your damage very easily, as opposed to a normal Yi playstyle where 66% of your damage would be physical, not in this case with this build. And yeah, that's one of the advantages of this build. Another one is that as I mentioned before, your W does a ton of healing, like twice as much healing. because you'll be around, you know, 200 to like 270-ish AP, and you have 100 AP, 100% AP ratio on your W. So yeah, look at this. When your W is maxed out, you heal for over 700 hit point at base value. So like when, you know, obviously it's increasing up to 100% based on the missing health you have. So if you're around, like, if you're getting really low, like 10% health, you're literally going to be healing for like 1400 hit point from one W. So, you know, that's like the best case scenario, right? You won't always use your W. You won't get a full channel off in a lot of team fights. That's actually not very common you get to do that. And a lot of the time I just use my W as like an auto attack reset. But the potential for you to heal a ton and just be unkillable while your W is channeling is very, very potent. Um, yeah, and then as I mentioned before, one of the best things about this build is just being able to make use of such a like powerful combination of defensive items like Zhonya's, Banshees, and then you can use GA with a normal Yi build, but like stacking GA on top of Zhonya's is just broken in my opinion. And yeah, I think that's kind of the general rundown for how this build works and why I think it's strong. You definitely, I think, like one of the top priorities for thinking about like when is it a good build, when is it a good game to build this, and when am I trolling when I'm building this. One of the top priorities you want to think about is if your team is all AD. If you have any champions on your team that are AP and are not gonna, you know, be totally useless, like you know, maybe you have a casting but you know they're gonna into you, I don't know, like if you have any reliable AP damage on your team, even if it's just one champion, as long as they're not horribly behind, like they'll do enough AP damage, and you probably don't, like, you probably should not build this. You should build the normal ADE build style, like play style. But if your team has like no magic damage at all, this can be even more of a viable option. It's probably one of the most important factors to consider is if you're on an all AD team. Um, the other thing, just again retouching on some of the important points of why this, like when you should consider building this, is if the enemy team doesn't have a lot of CC, because that can interrupt your W and just generally make it like easier for them to kind of lock you down and kill you before you can use anything like Zhonya's. Like a Sterax in a normal Yi build is really nice for when you're getting bursted down and CC locked, but with this you have Zhonya's and GA, and that's like your only real defensive options. Maybe you have a Banshee's build, but in general, CC is your enemy with this build, even more so than a normal Yi build. So not good against a CC team, CC heavy team. And then tanks, if they stack a lot of MR or armor, you don't have a lot of penetration in this build except for Rageblade, and you don't get as much true damage because you don't build as much AD, which your E scales off of. So with not as much true damage, and not as much penetration as something like a Black Cleaver would give or something like that, or different Yi builds, tanks are also kind of hard to deal with this build. Even though you can shred through tanks potentially with lethal tempo and all this on-hit damage, 3.37 attack speed, it's not ideal. Definitely not ideal, because you want true damage to shred through tanks and you don't get quite as much with this build. Yeah, I guess those are some of the main, like, those are the caveats and the pros and cons basically of this build. It does a lot of damage late game. So like I'm hitting this person for like 1500. I'm hitting this practice dummy for like 1500 damage per second, which is like as much damage as the max damage build, the 80 style build, does. Like, it's basically as much damage as a normal ADE build does. Blood Razor, Rageblade, Wits End, Death Stance, Sterax, that's like the max damage normal ADE build. That does 1500 DPS if you also sell your boost for GA. So you have those 6 damage items. This APE build, these 6 items, does like basically the same amount of damage. Look at that. So it's doing like, yeah, over 1500 damage. So it does just as much damage late game if you can get to this point in the game. It does cost more, but I think it actually has potential. The thing is, you definitely do not want to try this build in ranked if you have not, you know, really gotten familiar with it, as I said. But it has potential, and I'm going to keep experimenting with it. I'm going to see if there's a build, even playing it in, you know, high diamond and masters elo, I'm going to be trying this build if I feel like there's a good game for it, and I'll maybe update this guide as that goes along. But yeah, this is already turning to a long, very long video, so I'm going to cut it off here. If you have questions about this, you can let me know in the comments below. If you have any feedback as well, I'm really eager to get that kind of feedback from you guys and know about what I can do better. So be sure to leave that in the comments below too. You can also just message me on Discord, Twitter, or pop in my Twitch at twitch.tv/WujuSenshi. Sure to like if you enjoyed this content, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. And hopefully next time I come back with a guide to you guys, it'll be the actual Master Yi, guide, and not something kind of for fun like this. This is kind of like a troll. I did this guide because it was requested, right? But it has some potential. But yeah, it's also kind of like, it's mainly for fun. 99% of the time, just go the normal Yi build and you'll be fine. You'll do just as well as you would with this most of the time. This build is like something you can pull out if you really understand it, and it might work a little bit better in certain situations, but it's by no means something you have to learn. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all later. Take care.